At 28 years old, I was shot and paralyzed from the chest down. I had two options. I could stop and let the things I cannot control me, or I could move forward and put my energy into things that would improve my life and those around me. I chose to move forward and surround myself with risk takers, innovators, and leaders who've chosen the same path. Join us on the journey. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Forward with me, Derek Herrera, and my guest today, Andrew Marr. Andrew is a former Green Beret and now a nonprofit leader who serves as the founder and CEO of the Warrior Angels Foundation. Andrew sustained repeated trauma and injury to his brain that sent him down a dangerous cycle of medications and victimhood until he took control of his recovery and worked to fundamentally change the way brain injury and concussions are treated, not just for himself, but for so many others. We discuss the lowest points in his life, where he was close to suicide, and the decision he made at that point to take control and push forward while blazing a new path to recovery. Andrews refused to accept what many doctors told him and was able to work collaboratively with world-leading researchers to develop new treatments and therapeutic modalities for anyone suffering from brain injury. This journey is documented in a book that he authored called Tales from the Blast Factory, and also a documentary which was just released with Joe Rogan called Quiet Explosions. Both the book and movie are available on Amazon, so check them out, or visit his website, which is www.warriorangelsfoundation.org to learn more. At that website also, in addition to the services they provide, which are personalized therapies for anybody suffering from traumatic brain injury or repeated concussions, they also offer nutraceuticals and supplements, which actually have been well researched to show benefits to some people dealing with these types of issues. So definitely check it out and learn more at warriorangelsfoundation.org. After chatting with him, I feel like Andrew and I have a lot in common. We both were injured in the line of duty, and we both made a conscious decision to move forward and push beyond that and to push the limits of what was known at the time in the medical research community to try to change and alter the way people recover from injuries that we both were suffering from. So I truly hope you enjoy this episode of Forward with Andrew Marr. And as always, if you enjoy this podcast, please consider sharing with any of your friends, family, colleagues, or anyone you think may benefit. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please consider leaving us a 5-star review, any comments so we can improve the podcast while also expanding our reach and help others who may not already be in our tribe or network. Thank you again for listening, and hope you make it a phenomenal week. Wow. It's awesome, man. It's incredible to hear what you've been through and to understand that as well, because like you said, right, like people would never have recognized you, in that condition and see you here today, right? And having been told by multiple clinicians that these are all irreversible or lifelong conditions, right? For each and every one of those, like 12 or 13 meds that you were on, right? Like you'll have anxiety for the rest of your life. You'll have depression for the rest of you'll have blood thinners for the rest of your life. You'll have all this stuff, right?
Yeah. And it was like,
it's amazing.
Take a pen and a pad everywhere you go, because you're not going to be able to remember things in normal conversation. At the time, I couldn't. And your wife is going to have to be your caregiver, or we're going to have to get a professional caregiver because you can't take care of yourself. And that was absolutely the state that I was in. And I got in this very negative, I'm never going to get back what I had taken from me. And I feel like I'm being wronged, and everybody's out to get me, and nobody understands me. And that's just life, man. Life throws curveballs at all of us. That's the deal. And we get to decide in the end how we receive, internalize, and respond to life. Sometimes you need a wake up call to get woken up, to wake up. And that was mine. That woke me up, and I said, okay, man, this is not what I would consciously choose for my family. It's not what I would consciously choose for myself. And if we do have the ability to choose, I'm going to choose something else. And I don't care what anybody else says about it. I don't care if they say it's impossible. It's not to me.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome, man. Yeah. And so that it sounds like it provided a solid foundation for what you're doing now, right? With Warrior Angels Foundation and how you've continued to move forward. And I was doing more research on this. I know we had talked about it a few years ago as you were continuing to conduct, additional operations for clinical research and different things. And saw some of the stuff you guys have on your website, which was awesome. So like love to learn more about how the genesis of that came together and how you've been able to help so many people and kind of where all those interwoven lines of operation have come to get you to where you are today with clinical expertise, clinical research, non-traditional supplementation, all of these sorts of things, and then how you deliver those services and support to veterans and other people as well dealing with these types of things.
So it came about from just like the accidental entrepreneur that I was in this life circumstance and I didn't like the solution set that was being presented. And I think that's like half of what entrepreneurship is. Somebody says, this is stupid. Like there's got to be a better way to do this. And that was what I had, because having all these different providers, having all these different specialists, nobody was talking to one another. There was everything was like from their segmented piece of the pie, but there was no overlap in communication talking about it. So it was like the blind guys trying to figure out what they're like, feeling the elephant type thing. I was told that story a couple days ago. It was pretty funny, but like I think that was a good equation. And so I said, man, the hell with this. I'm going to go out and I'm going to find out what other people are doing that's cutting edge. And I just started talking to people in the community, started to inquire, and found all these different things, that alternative modalities that were out there for neurorestoration. And then we found out, okay, well, TRICARE doesn't cover any of that. Well, and I'm still on my way out of the Army at this point. Well, so what do we got to do to get over there? Well, if you want to do any of that, you're going to have to pay out of pocket. Oh, and you're also going to have to take leave to treat yourself. And so, well, that's what we did. And I didn't have enough. We didn't have finances to do that. So we leveraged it with debt. And it didn't matter because I was on a path to look for solutions. And so I went all over the country looking for and being just a number of different brain centers and different modalities. And it wasn't until I got with Dr. Mark Gordon out of Los Angeles, who is a practitioner of neuroendocrinology, that I really started to have some changes where I thought, oh my God, this is recoverable from. I can return to my pre-injury self. And it was linking up with him and running a sequence of very advanced lab diagnostics, looking at neurochemistry, looking at neuroinflammation and the kind of the harmony that they play together, and then looking at deficiencies, because secondary to the head trauma, deficiencies in your neurochemistry, what we call neurosteroids. And I was found to be like grossly deficient in everything that you need to have quality of life and to run the body, which the secondary effects of that are immune supportive and, anti-cancer, anti-inflammation, like all these secondary important benefits other than a sex hormone that is often not really thought of. And if you lack that, then you lack the ability to have a good system in place to respond to life. And so he was able to, with precision diagnostics, identify exactly what was going on, what was the root cause, and then what we needed to do to treat that in a personalized manner based on my unique background, my biochemical individuality, my gut flora, all these other components, and my genetic makeup to figure out, hey, what's the best route for this, personalized and highly specific to me. And when we were able to do two things, reduce and mitigate the neuroinflammation that was secondary in my whole body from the head trauma, which causes all neurodegenerative problems that we know of, we were able to mitigate that, essentially turn that gas leak off, and then replace or replenish the neurochemistry that was no longer present because of the trauma. Man, it was almost like that. And so I immediately felt better. And 2000, so since I started that treatment in 2015, since that time, I have been symptom and medication free, alcohol free, and performing as good, if not better, than my pre-injury self. And so here's the best part about it is it's not special or specific to me. The story here that we're telling, it's not my story, man. This is the story, not just in our community, but the veteran community who've seen were around combat on a day-to-day basis or preparing for combat on a day-to-day basis. This is the story. So once I was on the receiving end of that, it became very clear, like, okay, why isn't this available or well-known or being implemented or made accessible to people who need it? And there's a variety of reasons for that. And then the simple answer was, okay, we're going to figure out a platform to be able to bring individuals who could use this level of care with the provider and see if we can't produce similar results. And now today, since 2015, we've replicated that thousands of times with incredible results, just like my own. And this is not anything new. All the science exists. The research exists. It just took somebody to take it, put it together in a clinical model to be able to apply it. I call it translational medicine. And so we're not doing anything new here. There's not like you're using something the FDA doesn't approve of or anything like that. You can call it alternative, but it's not. It's just not widely applied because you really have to go into some advanced training to figure out how to assess and then diagnose and then make a personalized precision treatment recommendation. So, that was the process that led us to there. That was a process that led us to Warrior Angels Foundation, where we were kind of cutting edge because we were the first nonprofit that I know of, and I would know about it if there was another one at that time, that was able to bring precision personalized brain care backed by science to veterans. And we did so through a telemedicine model where we could reach our population wherever they were at because of our diagnostic labs and having sister labs or using mobile phlebotomists. We could draw the blood, send it to our lab. Lab runs the results. They send it in a HIPAA compliant platform to the provider. The provider gets it. He makes his assessment. He diagnoses and comes up with the treatment protocol. That's then sent to the patient virtually and in a handheld book. And then we were able to schedule a virtual consultation where you could go over everything in detail. So without having to take the veteran or the service member out of their geographical location, we could reach them wherever they were at and deliver world-class precision brain health and brain care. And the model has just expanded since that time. And it all came about, it was like, okay, well, here's all the things that we need to get done. How do we put that into a ecosystem that's harmonious? And how do we remove all the friction points and take this 37-step process and move it down into 5 or 6 to help somebody who's actually struggling and having a hard time reading more than a couple of sentences or relying on a caregiver to do it for them type of deal. So, my brother, who was also his Army aviation, he resigned his commission to help me get back on my feet. And we started the organization up together. And that's what we did in the early days, is figure out how to make this new platform. Because I was like, I'm never going to another doctor's office. I'm never going to wait for an hour to sit there for 5 minutes to be asked the same questions again. I was like, this is stupid. There's a better way to do this. And man, I'm fired up because that's what we were able to create and deliver.
Yeah, it's phenomenal, man. It's awesome. And I'm sure you made it sound real easy, right? But I'm sure there was a lot of work to be done, a lot of resistance encountered, a lot of challenges and setbacks along the way. But but it's pretty impressive, and also very smart with the efficiency you can have at scale using the telehealth platforms and things. And I feel like, I don't know if you'd agree, but I feel like endocrinology and neuroendocrinology is something that's just so uh, it's just not widely proliferated, right? People aren't doing this, and you never think about it, right? Like a lot of doctors will always, you have a symptom and they'll just say, okay, here's medication to address the symptom, right? And very rarely have I had people or clinicians or talk to, just informally, all the people that I've talked to that have these issues. Um, Very rarely does anybody say, okay, well, let's draw all these panels and look at your hormones and look at your cortisol levels, look at your stress imbalances, and how do we address those basic fundamental blocks of physiology to solve things, right? And so I did my personal story. I didn't have major TBIs. I might have had minor ones. I'm sure I've had minor ones, but
No, I
um,
can say definitively, there's no doubt about it.
yeah, no doubt about that. But after my injury, I tried to continue to maintain fitness, work out, do all these things, and uh, multiple diets, like all of this stuff, right? And was still unable to maintain energy levels and sleep quality and all that sort of stuff. I tried everything. I tried all the hacks, right? Like all the
Yep.
technological hacks and symptoms. I got the cooling mattress, like all this stuff, right? Like, but still. And someone asked me, as I was like, after years of dealing with this and learning about it, right? And someone asked me and said, like, hey, how's your sleep? And I'm like, oh, it's fine. They're like, when's the last time you had a dream? Right. And I was like, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Right. I can't remember the last time I had a dream. Right. And so then they're like, well, maybe you should look into like, you know, get somebody to check your panels and see what's wrong with your cortisol and your testosterone, like all this stuff. Right. And it turns out like, I had issues there. And once those were addressed, literally the week that happened, I started dreaming again. Right.
Mm.
Which means, in layman's terms, right, like I'm getting better sleep,
Mm-hmm.
everything balanced out. I started to, like normalize,
Yeah.
right? And it was as simple as that. But that's not, nowhere have I gone to see any, clinicians or medical practitioners was that ever offered,
Yeah.
right? It was something I had to seek out, and fortunately, over time, it took years to find, people that were kind of nudging me along the way, and then had to pay for it just with cash, right, to
Mm-hmm.
go see these experts. But it was worth every penny, right? Because it really changed my life, like, and that was the simplest thing. And I've started to ask that to some of my friends now, and I'm like, hey, when's the last time you had a dream, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, I don't know. I'm like, well, you probably have, some hormonal imbalances, or you may, like, I would suggest you just go get the labs drawn, right, and see what happens, and see where you go, right? Um, and sometimes it's not as simple as that, right? But one of the cool things I think too that it looks like from your website, and I was going to ask you about, that you've done as well, is even before you get into the very deep and nuanced level of personalized medicine and precision care, you guys have made available different supplements as part of a protocol on your site that just, it seems like, basically in general, those, 4 or 5 supplements packaged together can solve or help to mitigate a lot of the minor issues with that. And so I'm not overly familiar with a lot of those, but I was definitely going to inquire about that and see kind of how you become more efficient with, as you have people who address these issues and reach out to you for help,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they start with this initial protocol for 2 to 3 months or whatever it was before they'll go, and invest time to see the clinician, because there's a good chance that will resolve the issue. Or how does that work? Like, how's your flow work now for the patient intake?
So it came because we were having such success, and you can't hide information like that. When somebody's life gets turned around, they're not going to go just back to life like nothing happened. They're going to tell everybody about it that walks into their sphere of influence, whether they know them or not. And that's what was happening. And then we were blessed to get a lot of earned media and had done a lot in that light. And so we really pushed the agenda. We really pushed the narrative out there. And really, it was about providing information, useful information, so individuals knew that, you know what, there's an alternative. There's an alternative to psychotherapy and medication, and it's this X, Y, and Z. Don't take my word for it. We have a whole resource section. Look it up for yourself and see if that's something that you want to do. But know that you have an alternative, because nobody told me that that was the case. So that's really been like a staple with the foundation, is delivering scientifically valid and evidence-based information to let individuals be in the driver's seat of their life to live their best life. Okay, so to get this personalized level of care done, it ain't cheap. All right, so we couldn't obviously support everybody that wanted or needed to get support. So now we have to be very specific in who actually comes into our treatment pipeline. But we were having a lot of success with these nutraceuticals, and this was Dr. Gordon, and he had developed this nutraceutical protocol over time. And we thought, well, what if we start treating people with the nutraceuticals first, and let's run some clinical observations there and see if we have any benefit, if people benefit from it. And what we were able to find is, Derek, like roughly half the individuals that come through that are put on the nutraceutical protocol are doing so much better, they don't need to go any further. That's it for them. And the other half, they need more specific, more specialized type of care. That allowed us to open up our ability to reach more people directly and to do it more cost effectively. And then we started selling it, so individuals that wanted access to it, they could get access to it. But you come to our site, it's not a sales pitch. It's like, hey, here's the evidence, here's the information. If you want it, you can get it here, type of thing. We've made it available to you. And so that was there. And so basically we have two nutraceutical models, and they're both run by world-class clinicians in their field. One is Dr. Michael Lewis, who is a retired Army colonel. He was Department of Defense subject matter expert on both prevention and treatment of head injuries while he was in the military. And he's really found and wrote a ton of articles published in, the so-called best peer-reviewed literature that's out there on omega, high dose omega, that's fish oil, and the incredible anti-inflammatory benefits of that. And he's made a whole protocol around that, working with very specific companies. And so he's put together his nutraceutical protocol. And so we have that available, and you can go there and you can read all about it. The other one is what Dr. Gordon has put together, and we help to clinically validate both these lines of effort. And now we haven't done any peer-reviewed research. This is just clinical observations. And these are our clinical observations. And the observations is people get better. So the question you have to ask yourself is why? And now we're using a number of natural components. Again, they call them nutraceuticals, things found in nature that are put in a pharmaceutical grade package and combined together. Now they work on multiple pathways as opposed to a singular pathway. And that's kind of you want a very robust anti-inflammatory regimen, especially if you're in lines of work like we are, or high risk type of things, Leo, first responders, working with pneumatic tools, things of this nature, athletes. So it's very important that you keep the brain and the body in what we call a neuropermissive environment. What does that mean? That means it's an environment where it can heal, it can regenerate, it can have foster neuroplasticity. So we have nutraceuticals that are able to protect the brain, fuel the brain, repair the brain. And that's what we've been able to do with our nutraceutical products and our nutraceutical line.
It's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. And it makes a lot of sense. And I encourage anybody who's experiencing these issues to at least go and read, right, and learn about it and make informed decisions. It's really, really impactful that you're able to do that.
And that's been a game changer, really learning the role that inflammation plays, the role that neuroinflammation plays. And here's one of the kickers, man. It's not visible on any imaging. All right. So we can do any of this fancy imaging that we want to do. It all has its place, but it's not going to identify if there's neuroinflammation and rampant neuroinflammation. It's not going to identify deficiencies in the chemistry. So it only makes sense as part of anybody's diagnostic care model to look at that. Just like if you break your arm, you're going to get an x-ray. You start to have all these new cognitive and psychological issues, we can't just relegate somebody to psychotherapy and medication without doing a proper analysis and identifying if there's any issues with the brain. Oh yeah, by the way, that runs everything. And so that was the game changer, is understanding, okay, what role does neuroinflammation play? How does that lead to neurodegenerative disorders? But more importantly, what can cause neuroinflammation? And it's not about running around being scared. It's saying, okay, well, if this exists, can it be mitigated? And the answer is yes. You can mitigate it to the best of one's ability by using natural products. It's like N-acetylcysteine, mixed tocopherols, DHA from omega-3s, fish oils. These are some of the compounds that we found offers a very robust anti-inflammatory regimen. And then other things that I said, like repair, fuel, and protect the brain. But I just want to highlight that because that was such a game changer to me, because like you talked about, like endocrinologists, it doesn't seem like they're readily applying this. I saw 2 endocrinologists in the Army, and one of them had accused me. He said, hey, the only physiological explanation for your hormones being so low is because you abuse anabolic steroids. And before we even discuss assessing and addressing your deficiencies, I'm going to test you for anabolic steroids. And if you pass, then we'll talk about hormone replacement therapy. I mean, I was just floored. And that's a nice way to put it. And I asked the guy, hey, I was like, do you think any of the chronic blast wave exposure could be responsible for any of this? And he's like, nope, not in my experience. And this, he's a so-called guy who's been over to Iraq and whatnot. And that was kind of the mood on the topic. It was like, oh, these things aren't related, and you're abusing things, and they're psychological issues. And so that's what I want people to know. It's like what we're doing is we're breaking the new 4-minute mile. And just like that was done in the 1950s, is it gave everybody else psychological permission to do the same thing. And now we got high school kids, running sub 4-minute miles. We're doing the same thing. What was once thought was impossible is now possible. And we have case after case after case where it's the case, where it's been, the information's been provided. So we're trying to alert individuals who are having the same issues that they have now psychological permission to go out there and take ownership of their life.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. And I think one thing you said, which I think I can agree with, and a question I would ask too, that I'm guessing I can understand your answer, or no, you might agree with too, but we have this respect for authority in most cases, right? Well, not you and I, right? Because we're special forces guys. We have a healthy disrespect for authority,
disdain, if you will,
which is probably why we're in the line of industry we're in, right? Like in what we're doing. But most people, right, have respect for authority, and part of that is clinicians, right? And so you listen to what they say most times, and you take it as gospel, and you do that stuff, and they're infallible sometimes, right? But it seems like every 20 or 30 years, right? Like we have this like groundbreaking event, right? Like where you're like, oh, cigarettes are bad for you. Oh, okay. Right. Or, oh, you should probably eat less sugar.
Yeah.
Right. Or like all these sorts of things, right, that come out. And so do you think in 20 to 30 years, with additional technologies, we'll unlock some of the keys to understanding this and look back and say like, we'll have a moment like that where we're like, oh, how did we not think that getting concussive blast waves is bad, over a repeated exposure? Or like, how did we not know that standing in a boxing ring like Muhammad Ali did and, just suffering the worst repeated head injuries, right? Like was not going to lead to a good outcome, or Junior Seau, or all these other people, right, that have these types of issues like CTE and all this other neuro issues, right? Do you think that 20, 30 years from now, we'll be able to look back and kind of definitively say that?
Well, I mean, so let's just look at the current situation, the current state of affairs. When you talk about the mental health crisis in this country and globally, and the numbers pre-COVID was like 15% of the adult population who had been diagnosed with a mood disorder. That is a
Mm.
staggering number of individuals. It's now believed to be much higher than that. The suicide epidemic, both within the service and veteran community, without it, outside of it, the opioid epidemic, the TBI issues that we're seeing. Well, this is very easy. Like, we can chart over time how those have improved or gotten worse. And we can also chart what the treatments were and how much money was put into this. So let me get this straight. If all those areas where people are now worse off, and there's more of them than there was 20 years ago, if we understand the therapeutics being given and they're still not producing good results, and we understand how much money has been thrown away at these things, then it becomes very clear at some point in time, a responsible person an intelligent person will say, this don't make no damn sense. Like,
Yeah.
what do you
I,
what do you
I don't,
mean we spent this many billions of dollars on suicide prevention, and suicides have not improved whatsoever? They flatlined and gone up over the last 20 years in the military community.
yeah.
Billions spent.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think for sure, like, that's just the nature of things. It doesn't move fast. It's not taken collectively fast. It takes
Yeah.
pioneers and people, mavericks, to kind of push it forward. But I absolutely
Yeah.
agree with you, man. I think we'll look back and say, well, given the evidence, given the facts, like, we don't need to speculate. Like, that was obviously the wrong way to do it. Like, that was like leeches and bloodletting. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Or like burn pits, right? Or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah,
So like, yeah. And, I don't disagree with you at all. I feel like systemically though, there's probably some challenges associated with that. And so like, the things you're talking about with the research and the conflicting incentives and rates and epidemic, like, it's a pretty dynamic system. So I don't know that I would just like chalk it up to like complete failures and corruption and other things. It's really interesting, but I think like I want to empathize, right, with clinicians and understand the position they're in too. And so a lot of them, they spend all this time, they spend all this effort to get to where they are, and they're told this is what the evidence says, and this is how you help people. You give that, if this, give them this, right? Um, and so from their perspective, from a human perspective, I think that's challenging, right, for to overcome or to change, unless like you said, people are willing to conduct research, invest the time and money and effort to do that. But systemically too, we have a weird system, right, where the incentive structures sometimes are financial, and and we continue to do that. And so I don't know. I don't disagree with anything you said. I just, but I am like, I want to be optimistic and like empathetic to people in that position.
sure.
But for any doctors that are listening and whatever else too, it's like I feel like, and this is something I've heard from a lot of clinicians, right? Is over time they've been given less and less discretion, despite their experience, right?
Hmm.
And so, they used to have tons of discretion, right? They were entrusted as the expert to make sound judgments and reasoning within their expertise based upon the situation as they've assessed it and assessed a problem. Um, and over time, right, as we've become more bureaucratic and more litigious and more with other incentives, right? Like the decision making gets taken out of their hands, right? A lot of times,
Hmm.
which is tough, right? And there's new policies and more bureaucracy and more
Hmm.
centralization and those sorts of things. Um, and so I feel like I can empathize with that on like from a military perspective, right? Where like, when you're the ground force commander and you feel like your hands are tied and there's more and more rules of engagement and all
Hmm.
these sorts of things, and it just becomes challenging and you get frustrated, but you still just have to accomplish the mission and do what you can do. And um, so it's a long digression with no real question, but I agree with what you're saying. I just,
Yeah, no, I don't.
I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, and it's like, but it's systemic. I think there's systemic issues that I hope will improve. And, And I think the one thing that's inarguable, right, is if people continue to do research and new technology and new evidence comes to light, um, I'm optimistic that that will create positive change,
Mm-hmm.
right, for everybody. So we'll see.
I'm with
We'll see
you.
what happens in 20, 30 years. We'll see. Look back on this conversation and see
Well,
see how close we
I
were to
think the
being
best
accurate
thing
on that guess.
we can hope for is a system that's predicated on wellness as opposed to sickness. So that's the issue as I see it with the current model. Is it is predicated on sickness and then symptom management of that sickness and or illness. And many times the interaction that you're going to have with the provider or a clinician is under 10 minutes. Not a whole lot can be done or ascertained in 10 minutes of time. It's not a very scalable model, but it is a limiting factor for sure. So it's not necessarily placing blame or accusing clinicians of malfeasance or inappropriate behavior. But at the end of the day, fentanyl was prescribed countless times, and how many families that absolutely wreck. The standard for any mental health issue is selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. They are great, life saving for about 20 to 30% of the people that they're given to, which doesn't test better than placebo. The other people, disastrous side effects that include suicidal ideation and things of that nature. And so it's not a placing blame or accusing anything like that, but I do think we should point out problems to be able to come to new solutions. And I agree with you. That's what spurs innovation. That's what new discussions spurs new topics. It spurs new thought patterns, because I think that's really
Yeah.
what it's about, is coming up with a dynamic way to solve problems. And that's my hope from 20 years to 30 years and now, that we're more
Yeah.
predicated on wellness than as opposed to just sickness.
Yeah. Yeah. To your point, I think I'm optimistic that we'll continue to develop better options. Um, the one thing which is good, and I can't understate the impact that that will hold. Right, of all the money that we pour into research and development for new options, um, I have to believe that some of that will create better solutions in the future. Um, the challenge, and I think one of the biggest issues, and I don't know if you'd agree, but I would assume this has had some impact on what you're doing, is the incentive structure uh, isn't always there for you to take the time and effort to disprove someone else's hypothesis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, when you look at things like, hey, with a couple $100 a month for non-pharmaceutical, for nutraceutical supplements, we can obtain similar or better effects with minimal side effects for these types of people. You know, you don't have an army of, pharmaceutical companies jumping to back you
Mm-hmm.
and fund you to prove that, right? Nor do you have the massive financial upside and the gain should you be successful in proving that and disproving their hypothesis as well. Um, so I don't know. It's a systemic issue, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to solve it, um, but you figured out a way to, like, and to get the information make the information available to people, right, and to adhere to the same levels and standards of evidence,
Mm-hmm.
uh, to ensure that they're armed with the knowledge and the information, and can make their own decisions. And so I'm optimistic that like that freedom of information, that freedom of
Yeah.
choice will continue to drive forward and help drive results for people that are interested, in exploring these things, and for you and your organization to continue to have the impact on so many people like it has.
I think when you get down to it, and it's a kind of a tough question today with the recent just failure of the government of Afghanistan and everything to do with that. But what our service really was about not only the people to the left and right of us, absolutely, but it was about supporting and preserving the tenets and the fundamentals of the Constitution of the United States. First Amendment, the right to free speech, protected speech. We should be able to ask questions. We should be able to question why we do things a certain way. We should have a dialogue about that. We should be able to have discussions about alternatives to problems or different solution sets. And that's what it's all about, like you were talking about. So it's delivering that information. And that's one of the things that makes this country so incredible is our ability to freely disseminate information. And yes, that can be taken advantage of. That makes the responsibility taken, puts the ownership on the individual to disseminate what's good and what isn't for their own life. And so going back to what's it all about, man, it's just that, like putting out information where people can decide if they want to action on it or not, whereas before they didn't even know that was an alternative.
It's awesome, man. It's awesome. And so thinking about setbacks and challenges, what are some of the more colorful? Do you have any stories of resistance? Like, do you guys ever get like crazy emails from people telling you guys don't know what you're talking about, or like what are some of the more interesting things you can share about the resistance you've seen to the mission you're on? Because I'm assuming when you do anything like this that could be seemingly controversial, you're going to have haters, right? And
Yeah,
like
for sure.
and people that don't
Doc,
believe what you believe.
Dr. Gordon and I have lectured and presented both nationally and internationally, and we were brought into the United Kingdom's TBI Summit Symposium 2020, right before COVID kicked off. And it was to look at new diagnostic approaches and new clinical approaches to traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress. They're having the same issues over there, go figure, as our soldiers and veterans are having over here. So we were able, and now it's a socialized medicine in the UK, and that's the model across the board. So we are actually had the benefit of, it was the Ministry of Defense that put together this summit, and it was the Surgeon General of the Ministry of Defense that chaired the meeting, and it was at Imperial College. And we were able to present to all of the so-called experts, the scientists, the clinicians, the researchers in the field, and the people that actually make the decisions on how to run healthcare in that country. And you would have thought that we had said that all redheaded children should be burned alive and piss on the ashes, because these psychiatrists were losing their shit when Dr. Gordon was talking about, and like he brought in, I'm not shitting you, a mountain of articles this deep, and they had already been pre-populated, and talking about the importance of things like growth hormone and testosterone, and how we were able to see this secondary to head trauma, specifically to blast waves, and how because of the neuroinflammatory process, this causes these hormones to become deficient. Therefore, if we can replace or replenish these are the effects that we were seeing. And they just lost their shit. I don't. I have my take on it, but like that's just where you're behind the curtains. You're seeing people who do the research, who do the clinical care, who make the decisions, and the questions and the things that were being thrown out there didn't have anything to do with patient care or worrying about the end result. It was about whose research is better than the others, and where is the dollars going to fund it. And I don't want to stop funding to going to here, to going to this, and here's why. And so, that has been that's been played out in several different large scale arenas where I wouldn't believe it if I didn't witness it firsthand. And so that's some significant, setbacks that we've seen. How to end up? Well, ended up where we were going to do a huge research project there in Birmingham. I forget the neurotrauma center there. And they were going to put like 10 million pounds into that project. And we were going to do, I think, 500 controlled double-blind placebo study and look at what the results were going to be. That kind of got derailed with COVID, and so it's been put on pause. But But at the end of the day, there was people there with enough foresight and saying, well, why don't we just do the work ourselves and see what type of
Yeah.
outcomes are produced, and then let's have a discussion about how we would want to
That's awesome.
implement that or not. So it hasn't happened, but that's just like a good example, man, of how like this
Yeah.
old way of doing business, no matter if it's under the scientific model or anything else, clashes with the new way of doing business.
Yeah. It's impressive. Yeah. And I mean, it's good to their credit, right? Like, you know, they didn't just, take it out for what it's worth, right? And say, oh, we're just going to discard all this information. Like, let's investigate it
Yeah.
and figure it out for ourselves, right? If we still don't believe you, but there's a chance, then that's good.
Which we talked about it
That's awesome.
earlier. That's how I understood the scientific model to be. That was so great. Like it's never definitive. It's always challengeable.
Yeah.
There is no consensus. How on earth could there be consensus? There should
Yeah.
never be consensus, and we should continue to push it and evolve it and iterate it, whatever that means, in whatever way. The model itself is beautiful. Humans have a way of just mucking some stuff up.
Yeah. Egos,
Yeah,
personalities,
yeah.
we're infallible,
Yeah.
right? No one's perfect. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
yeah.
I lead the charge on that, Mr. Infallibility, right here.
Nice. Hell yeah. That's awesome. Well, cool. So throughout those times, would have been the most effective things that you think about or lean on to continue driving forward when you encounter setbacks, both personally and professionally? Like what keeps you going?
My dad gave me some really good advice when I was having just very difficult times that we talked of earlier, and it had to be difficult for him to hear, his boy suffering and not knowing, what life was going to be like for him. Just to have, like, my parents had four boys. We were all in the military. Three of us were in combat together over a period of like 10 years. So what it must have been like to have, I have a family of my own now, but to have your children out in war zones constantly for the better part of a decade, and then seeing the consequences of that is devastating. To kind of give some context to it, and again, I was telling my dad, the current state of affairs, and I wasn't sure how I was going to move forward. And he said, son, I can't understand everything it is that you've been through, and I know that you're hurting. But if you could find a way now to make your mission in life, to make your new mission in life about helping somebody else, I think you're going to find that that will be able to help you. And at that moment, I wasn't in a position where I could do anything with that, but it stuck with me. And that was one of the drivers that got my life back on track. Because when I was able to take a step outside of myself and look around, I realized this isn't specific or special to me whatsoever, like I thought it was. Matter of fact,
Mm.
I see people that I love falling by the wayside. I got to be able to do something. So that was what it's all about. And I think we can all fall on something like that. We can find something where we can serve something bigger than ourselves. And that's something that I've been able to fall back on in difficult times and figure out how to. That makes it worth it. It gives you an objective, like when you're in MARSOC training, when you're in SF training, like you can't go in there with any questions. Like, oh, well, if it gets tough, or like I'm tired, how am I going to react or respond to that? It's got to be like, hey, this is the end state, and it does not matter what's between me and that end state. I will endure and thrive because of it. So for me, it gave me a new goalpost, a new mile marker
Yeah.
to aim at, and I was like, that's my end state, and I can probably become a better person if I get outside of myself and start thinking how I can support and serve others.
It's awesome. Yeah. Couldn't agree more. And feel like I've had a very similar experience. So it's incredibly profound. And I would challenge anybody listening to consider that, right? So, if you ever find yourself, which everybody does, right, feeling sorry for yourself and in that moment of weakness or self-pity or doubt or confusion, you know, if you focus on other people outside of yourself, then in helping someone else, I guarantee you'll snap out of it, right? Almost instantly. It's not about you anymore. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. You'll stop feeling sorry for yourself. And, and then when you have a mission and a purpose and an impact greater than yourself, it makes it really easy to push forward. So
That's it, man.
thank you for sharing
Yeah,
that.
it
Yeah.
makes life worth living for sure.
It's so awesome. Well, Andrew, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. We didn't even get a chance. We'll have to bring you back. We've been going for an hour and a half now. We'll have to bring you back and talk more. I'll come on your podcast too, and we'll start chatting. But before we go too, I didn't get a chance to even talk about the book that you co-authored with your brother, which is a bestseller, and the documentary, which it's been turned into as well. So the book is called Tales from the Blast Factory, and the documentary is called Quiet Explosions. And so tell us a little bit about those, and then also where people can go find you or how to contact you for anything too before we close out.
It was my brother's idea to write the book, and he said, I think we have a blueprint now how other people that are navigating similar or the same terrain can now look at to implement in their own lives. And what it's really about is the principles of resiliency as applied to my personal life and struggles around my head trauma. And so that's what the book is about. And then the manuscript made its way out to LA, and it got put in front of a filmmaker out there, an award-winning Emmy award-winning documentarian. And she had the idea that to do a documentary completely around that. And we said it can't just be about military. We got to look at the entire spectrum of individuals. So we have, former Super Bowl MVPs, big wave surfers, special operators, firemen, and like everyday regular type people in between, with one common denominator. When this happens, here's what rock bottom looks like. And it looks like the same for everybody, regardless of skin color, occupation, background, or anything else. And here are proven therapeutics that are an alternative to the current model that we're going to show have validity, and you're going to be able to learn all about them. So it's not only does it identify a problem, it goes one step further than that, which is the first time done on the big screen, and that's to give actual evidence-based and scientifically valid solutions for head trauma. So it couldn't be, and we had the top clinicians, neuroscientists, and researchers on it as well. I mean, just a very professional effort. We had Emmy Award winners, Academy Award winners, just a ridiculous amount of talent and people supporting the film to get it done. We've won every film festivals that we've been in. It is on every platform right now outside of Netflix. So Quiet Explosions, Healing the Brain, 90 minutes. And the director is a master. She is an absolute master at making these advanced neurological concepts so commonplace that anybody can understand them without having to think hard about it. So I can't recommend it enough.
It's awesome. Heck yeah. And then the website for
Warrior Angels
Foundation
website is waftbi.org. waftbi.org. You can find us and you can get in touch with us there directly. So that's the best way to do that.
Hell yeah. It's awesome. Andrew, I can't thank you so much for your time. This has been a lot of fun hearing your story and learning from your experiences firsthand. So thank you so much for your willingness and your generosity to come on the show and share. And thank you for all that you continue to do to try to help not only veterans, but other individuals dealing with this and the change that you're looking to create moving forward with Warrior Angels Foundation. Truly a pleasure having you on. Can't thank you enough. And look forward to chatting with you again soon.
Yeah, it's been a real honor, Derek. Thank you.